Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it was heavy.
Was it? Good. Good.
When I left Oklahoma City, got to Hinton, it was just a few drops across the South Canadian River, a few drops of rain. Hinton, first few snowflakes. Weatherford to Sayre was heavy.
Oh.
Then it got to Sayre, it kind of let up, got to Texas line, the road was dry.
Yeah.
So
It was a kind of a little, fairly narrow band down there, but I understand it was pretty
it was
heavy.
8 inches out around northwest Oklahoma City.
Good. Boy, they need it. Of course, 8 inches of snow equals about,
3/4 of an inch of water.
well, yeah, barely, yeah.
It was a real heavy, wet snow. Had to stop twice on the snow on all that shit.
Right, right.
Had all the heat in the world on it. It was almost, and the people who driving that stuff all the time, when you live in that part of the world.
Oh, yeah,
Just hope
Yeah.
we don't get more buffalo down.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
That's the,
and more snow possible this week.
yeah, yeah.
lake effect snow is something else.
Yeah, I have a buddy at the gym that used to live up in that part of the world. He talked about that. He actually lived up in Canada, and he said you could look south where they were, that because of the way the wind moved across that lake, that it didn't affect them. So, but you could look out there, said you could look down south on that lake out there, and you could see just this big white cloud out there that would move, and said you knew that Buffalo was getting it, and said we would get snow, of course, but we didn't get that lake effect. He said you'd have snowflakes this big around coming down to where you couldn't even see the size of golf balls, big old fluffy things. And he said, I mean, it piles up in a hurry.
I think it was actually a year or 2 years ago that we had like thick snow here.
Yeah, there were little spots. There were spots of it, yeah, and it's really something that has to be seen to be believed. It's pretty substantial. I
Wind and
did-
moisture come across the water, things happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that water, never gets, I forget what the water temperature, but he said it's the spring and the fall as that lake starts to warm up, or is warmer, is when it's the worst. But anyway, I was pleased to learn that. I don't ever want to experience it in my life, but anyway. Well, glad y'all are here. We'll see. I saw Gordon and Jeanette get here a while ago, but I guess they'll wander down our way shortly, I hope.
Lynette will be here. She's a little under the weather.
Okay, well, like I say, we're many of us are,
Hanging in there.
yeah, hanging in there somehow,
Yeah,
so,
it's kind of,
Yeah.
there's a lot. There's always a lot goes on. First part of the winter.
yeah. Oh, hi, Alicia. Hi, Glenay, and hi, Lisa. I hope you guys are out there
Yeah.
tuned in here. Dick, mark Alicia present, please. Per Gary, he says she's here online. Anyway, well, we're gonna keep just about today and next time, and we'll wrap up this journey through the smaller prophetic books, the 12 as they're known in Hebrew scriptures, and we'll be in Micah starting at chapter 4 is where we'll dive in today. I brought last week we were talking about some of the problems that they had, and it was how they were just abusing each other, and in particular the wealthy folks and the folks in power and government were abusing the people to such an extent that God just finally, he said that, if you want to know why you're going into exile, that has a lot to do with it. I mean, it's bad enough that you've gotten into all this idolatry and all the other things you're doing, but all that leads us down this path. And now, they were talking about how they were literally taking such advantage of the poor and, the widows and the sick and the vulnerable people. You think about it, the most vulnerable people in the world, and they basically were manipulating them into such a point where they the abusive interest rates, things like that, that ultimately made it so they just, they just basically had to sell themselves into slavery. So you've got this human trafficking thing here that was going on. That was actually institutionalized here. And anyway, just some of these things and these abuses that are happening, and it was just unbelievable. And God really came down on them for it. It was really, and so anyway, and the other thing was, of course, the priests and the prophets, the false prophets, and there was one on every corner, were condoning this. Basically, these rich guys would come tell a prophet, here's $100. Give me support me in this. Say that, prophesy that the Lord has decreed that I am supposed to be the richest man in Calaveras County or whatever, and it's just unbelievable. I think it was Monday, I was going through, the usual junk mail that winds up in my mailbox. I gotta be careful. I don't hold that up with the camera to see it because I don't want to reveal who this is, but there is a check here. Yeah, and did you mark Glenay present? Glenay?
No.
Yeah, go ahead and mark her present because she's online as well. Gary's up there monitoring who's checking in there.
That makes me a little bit nervous. Knowing I'm being monitored all.
That's right. That's right. Big brother is watching you. Anyway, so in the mail comes this thing, and this is an actual, no kidding, negotiable check, okay, for $3,000. And the envelope was talking, all this stuff talks about it's time to bounce back and it's time to get ready for Christmas. You've got money now when you need it. And so you can take care of your Christmas shop and all that stuff. And it's an honest to gosh negotiable check for $3,000. So that'd be pretty nice. I thought, I could probably use $3,000 and coming falling out of the sky like that. The only thing is, you read the fine print on the back. Annual percentage rate, effective annual percentage rate. Y'all sitting down? Just almost 55%.
Whoa.
Yeah. And here's what happens when you start to read the fine print. No, here's the boss. Let's see what she has to say. Yeah, John and Lisa are also online. So if you want to mark them present. Anyway, so if you read the fine print, here's what happens. The instant you put that check in your bank account, you get $3,000 in your bank account, you owe this outfit $4,200. And even if you pay it off early, you still owe them $4,200 because this is set up, it's not set up as a interest per se, it's all these handling fees and all this other business. So anyway, so it's not, oh my gosh.
Guido down at the corner does better than that.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, yeah, and of course you sign away every legal rights you possibly have. And it's just, oh boy, it's scary.
Oh,
Predatory.
yeah.
So my point is, in Micah's day, in our day, what's changed? What's changed? This predatory thing is preying on each other, eating each other alive. It's just, yeah. We've gotten so much more advanced, sophisticated, so much nicer people than they were back then, right?
I think they're just a little sneakier about it today.
I don't think they're sneaky. This isn't sneaky. Well, maybe it is a little bit.
You read the fine print.
Well, you have to.
That's the sneaky
Yeah.
part.
Have to read the fine print. Always read the fine print, folks. Anyway, I just thought that was
Such things.
I
interesting.
haven't seen that yet. I'm glad you showed that.
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting. And of course, the thought is, I guess they're not sending those puppies out unless people are prone to go cash those things.
They're making, yeah.
So probably without reading the fine print. Anyway, predatory.
Yeah.
absolutely predatory. And I just, but welcome to our world. Now, you know, I almost hate to start there because we have been inundated, immersed in a lot of this desk pounding judgment stuff for a long time. You know, these 12 prophets and these. You notice I'm trying everything I can do to walk around the word minor. I hate using that word with regard to these guys. But these prophets are, you know, they have a pretty difficult job to do to try to tell people. In this case, of course, remember where Micah is in the timeline. Micah is contemporary with Isaiah and several of the others that we've encountered, Hosea, and they're all prophesying about the same time, and it's right about the time the northern kingdom's getting ready to get clobbered, and the southern kingdom is threatened. Later on, you get, you know, later on down in time, you come to a few of the others that are where the northern kingdom has already been conquered. The southern kingdom is still around, but is on the verge of the same fate. And so you get Jeremiah, Ezekiel, those guys fall in there in that. So Micah still, the northern kingdom is still around, and Micah is prophesying as much, although he's from we mentioned last week, the far southwest part of the southern kingdom. His hometown is actually just right across the road from Gath, which is where Goliath was from, if you remember. So it was actually the one of the major Philistine cities. So you think about how San Diego and Tijuana are just, you really can't really much tell where one ends, the other begins, or what we talking about, Nuevo Laredo, or what was the other one we had down in Texas, El Paso? What's across from El Paso? Juarez, yeah, Ciudad Juarez. It's similar kind of an arrangement, where they're just kind of a border town basically, but it's way down southwest part, down toward the what we might call the Gaza Strip today, or down toward the Suez. That's where Micah is from. His prophecy is aimed primarily, I think, because of the urgency of the situation at the northern kingdom, because their demise is imminent. You know, and but the same is true for the southern kingdom. You know, God is sparing them for a while. I think he hopes that if they see what happens to the northern kingdom, it'll shake them up and get their attention a little bit. But as we know, it didn't quite work out that way. Been saving you a seat. We got plenty of room today. We've got Lisa's out, Glenae's out. We've got several. Herma Lee's out. So anyway, but Micah chapter 4. We'll pick up in there. His prophecy last week, of course, was again focusing on these things about how they were abusing each other. How first of all, the governmental leadership was as a big part of this, and they were wrapped up entirely with the financial sector, and they obviously were engaging in this incredible abuse, doing things that are very clearly forbidden in the Mosaic Law. But they had the priests and the prophets who were condoning all this stuff because they were being paid to. And but as I've just demonstrated here, I had a little deal here I got in the mail, some junk mail. It's a check for $3,000. It's a negotiable, it's a no kidding check for $3,000. But according to the fine print, the instant you put that check in the bank, you owe the company $4,200. And that's not even if you pay it off early, you still owe them $4,200 for that $3,000. Yeah. And anyway, I thought Gordon might enjoy reading the fine print of it. But anyway, you sign all your legal rights away. It's a horrible deal. So, you know, folks, we haven't changed much. 55% interest. So, yeah, we haven't changed much, folks. And these people would get, you know, who literally couldn't afford to eat, You know, some of these guys would be more than happy to give them a little loan at probably more than that, and then when they couldn't pay it back, one thing led to another, and this is where they sell them in slavery. Widows, orphans, the most vulnerable. And that's the thing, when you start to see the most vulnerable people in society being targeted for this kind of abuse, and that was, I mean, and this is not even to mention the idolatry and the other things they were into. This is, more on the civil and social side of things. But God just basically told them, you know what? I just had a snoot full of this. And if you want to know why you're going into exile, what do you think you deserve? And it's sure not a pat on the back. And anyway, so this is what we've been hearing, for the entire, 12 weeks now. It has been, God is basically taking a brick bat and trying to get these people's attention. And it's amazing that the only real success we saw in any of this happened when this guy who didn't even want to go winds up in the capital of their enemy, the enemy capital here, the capital of Assyria, which is Nineveh. The guy didn't want to go there in the first place. God has to go through all kinds of machinations of fish and everything else to get him there. Once he shows up, sounds like he just half-heartedly told them to repent, and they did. And it made him mad. And so it's like the only one who's listening, to God at this point are the people that you think had least use for him. And I think it's interesting too, because that it's the same Assyria that about 100 some years later comes along and is actually doing the smiting for God here. They you see they obviously know something. They haven't forgotten everything about Yahweh. They're that worship of God has faded. There was this big, as it happens, a big revival, and then it all kind of tapers back off. After the peak, you get back down to the valley pretty quick, but they still have this knowledge of the true living God, and are in many ways very responsive and acknowledging of him. So even in the midst of that, fascinating, isn't it? But God's chosen people are literally jumping through hoops trying to ignore him, and it's scary. It's a scary deal. Anyway, so that's where we have been, and that's where but there's another side to that coin, because even in the midst of this, and God's not relenting, he goes, I'm hauling you people off, this is pretty much a done deal now, so prepare for the worst, because, basically it's God saying, I'm done with you. This is it. But even in that situation, he still has a plan, and there's still hope. He's still at work. He's still doing some amazing things, and that's where we're going to be today. Isn't it about time? So anyway, we're going to dive in here with that background again, chapter 4. Micah chapter 4. Would somebody please read verses 6 through 8 in that chapter, please?
On that day, this is the Lord's declaration. I will assemble the lame and gather the scattered, those I have injured. I will make the lame into a remnant, those far removed into a strong nation. Then the Lord will reign over them in Mount Zion from this time on and forever. And you, watchtower for the flock, fortified hill of daughter Zion, the former rule will come to you. Sovereignty will come to daughter Jerusalem.
A lot of imagery in all this, but he's got a really profound message. On that day.
That's in the future.
Well, I just want to say, just exactly which day is he talking about is on that day. He is referring back to a future prophecy here. You know, he starts off in verse 4, and it's obviously very future oriented. So on that day, and very adamant, this is the Lord's declaration. Lisa, this is especially directed at you. He says, I will assemble the lame. So I just want you to know that's you know, that's I hope a hopeful thing. And anyway, oh yeah, I didn't. Lisa just absolutely tore her foot all up.
Oh.
Yeah, so she's laid up, probably sitting at home watching us and with a big old bag of ice. Anyway, you know, I'll gather the scattered, those you know, that I've wounded here. This word, I will make the lame into a remnant. That word "make" is an interesting word that could also mean to reshape or to transform or to rebuild or remodel. That's kind of the idea of it. It isn't like creation where you make something out of nothing. This is, I'm going to take this and I'm going to make it better mousetrap, you know, or whatever. But anyway, that's the idea here. Those far removed, so he's pointing out again into the future, not only the immediate future with the exile and the return from the exile, but I think even beyond that. Now notice in verse 8, in verses 6 and 7, he's kind of speaking in third person more or less. And in verse 8, it kind of turns around. Now, what is it? Like, for example, there at the end of verse 7, he goes, the Lord will reign over them in Mount Zion. Now, verse 8, and you, notice how it makes that switch there, where it starts to get really personal now. And mentions, you know, the watchtower for the flock, reigning from Zion. Sovereignty will come to you, daughter Jerusalem. These are all basically poetic terms for the city of Jerusalem itself. Zion, of course, being the hill that it's situated on, and has to do with, again, with that idea of the king reigning, of the reign. That is, they're very integral. Anytime you see those references to Zion like that, that's specifically talking about the Lord ruling there. So this is really, really interesting. So it's all about the remnant at this point. And this prophecy obviously dealing in the future. Remember, the Assyrians haven't shown up yet. Okay, they haven't conquered the northern kingdom. They haven't attacked the southern kingdom really to that extent at this point. It's all getting ready to happen, or is happening, but it hasn't been completed yet. So this is still a future deal. But the prophecy has to do with the remnant. In other words, speaking of it as it is, in fact, an accomplished historical fact. But the assurance is that even though most of you are going to be destroyed, God is not going to completely wipe you out. There will be a remnant. There will always be a remnant. And I guess that's number one question. I kept working through this as I was reading this and studying through this week. What can God do with a remnant?
Almost anything.
Anything he wants.
And I think it's so interesting that how often does, you know, a remnant is where he likes to start. I'll tell you this much, that remnant that was left over after the exile, he had their attention. You know, I want you to think about this for just a second. The main issue, I think the thing that bothered God the most was the fact that they had flung down the first commandment. You will have no other gods before me. They had gotten, as we're going to see a little bit here in their next couple of verses, they had gotten so immersed in all this idol worship and everything, except they were going out of their way not to worship God and to worship everything else they could think of. And that was the main issue. I mean, obviously that leads to other things, abusing their neighbors and doing all the other things here that we were talking about. But it was that root of idolatry was what he was really after. And then when they hauled him off to Babylon, now I want you to kind of fast forward to the Jewish people today, well, and since that time. It amazes me, it is just absolutely incredible, the lengths that any Jewish person will go to avoid even the Jewish people who aren't all that observant will go out of their way to avoid any kind of idolatry, or appearance of that. My point is, it broke them of that forever. To this day, the effect of God's discipline in that area is unquestionable. I think that's amazing, isn't it?
They don't have the over idols.
Well, none of us
Same
do.
one.
None of us do. Yeah, they have the same ones we do. Fortunately, fortunately, we have all the TV networks and everything to tell us it's okay. So I'm good with that. You know, the high priest of NBC, the high priest of the peacock on NBC. That's one of our idols. And what do you worship? That peacock. Oh boy. Yeah. So I'm not saying we're any better off. And as we've demonstrated pretty thoroughly today, that nothing's changed. But in terms of the overt stuff, anyway, yeah. But God will take that remnant and do some incredible things with it. And I think that's what is still amazing to me. Remember that by the time we get here, there's already a lot of prophecy that looks like it's going down the tubes. And you try to figure out, well, why did God tell David that he'd always have somebody on the throne? And yet, later on, by the time you get to Kenaiah, he just finally says, I'm done with your line too, David. You guys have just absolutely just flung down and stomped on our agreement. I'm done. So has God painted himself in a corner? Is he going back on his word? Is he contradicting himself? How's he going to work all this stuff out? And even then, I'm sure a lot of these people were scratching. The people who were really thinking about this were scratching their heads and wondering. Remnants, Elijah, on the run from Jezebel. Figured he was the last man standing. What did God tell him? There were several hundred other people that wouldn't dare bow the knee to Baal. He wasn't the only one. Feels like it sometimes. But what did God do with that remnant? Incredible things, folks. Incredible things. So, yeah, it's okay to be a remnant. And I think that's it might be that if you do happen to be a remnant, you might be in exactly the best place you could possibly be for God to do something great. And the other thing is that by the time you're a remnant, you're so weak and you're so beat up and you are so absolutely destitute that anything amazing that happens is going to have nothing to do with you. It's going to be 100% God at work. So he gets the glory. There's no way you're going to pat yourself on the back, congratulate yourself for how clever you are, because that has nothing to do with it. It's the grace and mercy of God at work. Chapter 5, someone read verses 1 through 3, please. This is a real interesting passage.
Now, daughter who is under attack, you slash yourself in grief. A siege is set within us. They are striking the judge of Israel on the cheek with a rod. Bethel, Ephathat or something. You are small among the clans of Judah. One will come from you to be ruler over Israel for me. His origin is from antiquity, from ancient times. Therefore, Israel will be abandoned until the time when who is in labor has given birth. Then the rest of the ruler's brothers will return to the people of Israel.
I've been working all week. As I've had opportunity to try to get my Christmas lights up. Christmas is sneaking up on us, folks. Thanksgiving did sneak up on us, and Christmas isn't far behind. I'm just desperately trying to get all that done and whatnot. So this is a good time to run across this little passage of scripture. Verse 1 starts off talking about, remember he had been talking about the daughter, Jerusalem, Zion, all this stuff. Now he's talking about daughter who's under attack, obviously. And this, at this point, could be a reference to Jerusalem, although it could also be a reference to the northern kingdom, because they were both facing issues from Assyria at this point. Talking about slashing yourself in grief. One of the real common pagan customs, the idol worshiping customs they like to do, was if they wanted to get their God's attention, they'd start cutting themselves. They start cutting on themselves and bleeding and stuff all over everything. Remember, we saw them doing that back to Elijah. We saw the prophets of Baal doing that, remember? This is a real common kind of a thing. And so obviously challenging them at that point in their idol worship. A siege is set against us. This is very obvious what's happening here with the threat from the Assyrians. Striking the judge of Israel on the cheek with a rod. That can also, it's the same word used for a scepter. So this is basically prophesying. I'm not sure if it's toward the northern kingdom, when they finally conquered them. And of course, Hoshea was the king. He wasn't worth keeping up there. Or if it's actually looking forward a couple hundred years here to when this is going to happen to Zedekiah. Kind of some amazing prophecy here, where basically the Assyrians at this point, who are the main threat, by the time you get to Zedekiah and in the southern kingdom, it's Babylon. Now, that the king of Israel basically is being, the only time he can speak is when the Babylonian king whacks him on the mouth and tells him to talk. That's how it works. This is kind of frightening. So in the midst of all this, the kings of Judah are descended from who? Their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather is a guy named David. Okay? And they are all descended from David through Solomon. So these are all great-great-great-great, etc., grandsons of King David. Even up to this point, right now, even up to Zedekiah, believe it or not, they're all in that same line, that family line of David through Solomon and his son Rehoboam, and on it goes. That line is continuing. What's David's hometown? No, that was Jesus' hometown.
Bethlehem.
Yeah, Bethlehem. You don't have a lot of fun Christmas time. Study Bethlehem. Study the history of Bethlehem in Scripture. First shows up in Genesis, by the way. Really interesting to find out what God's done there at Bethlehem is very significant. It's just a little old farm town is all it is. It's got an elevator, a gas station, and that's the post office. There's not much more to it than that. It's pretty small. Just a little small farm town down there south of Jerusalem. But boy, some amazing things have happened there. This little shepherd kid named David, he was the last one on earth he thought would ever make king. And his whole family thought the same way, which I think is interesting too. But God knew what he was doing. And so anyway, so isn't this interesting? Now he's talking about when just the next breath, when God is telling him that the king of Judah is going to be a puppet of this foreign conqueror, and even where he's just can't even do anything without permission or prodding from whoever's actually pulling his chain here at this point. And now so this is the descendant of David, right? The king of Judah. But all of a sudden now let's talk about, he just goes to David's hometown. Remember how I told you last week, Micah can be kind of challenging because he tends to jump I mean, this guy can jump like a flea or a frog, or I don't know what it is, but trying to follow him, it makes sense. It's just kind of, you just got to kind of keep locked on there. So we go from the fact that the king now is absolutely powerless under the conquerors. Now we go back to that king's great, et cetera, granddad's hometown, Bethlehem. Don't worry about trying to pronounce Ephratah. It's kind of an older version of the name. Bethlehem in Hebrew means house of bread. And so obviously referring to the elevator in town there, big grain elevator, whatnot, probably had big mill, big flour mill. And so, Bethlehem, house of bread. You're the smallest, you're small among all the kind. It's in Judah, descended from the tribe of Judah. And they say, you may be the smallest one, but one will come from you to be ruler of Israel for me. Well, has that already happened in this time? Yeah, in a way, yeah, because the kings of Judah are descended from David, who is from there. But now, here's where it starts to get a little interesting. His origin is from antiquity, from ancient times. This is, in Hebrew, it definitely implies prior to creation. So who existed here then? God himself. And then, of course, now we go back, Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor is given birth. Is that the fullness of times? Is that a reference to Jesus' birth? Hard to say. Doesn't make much difference, really, at this point. Then the rest of the ruler's brothers will return to the people of Israel. An incredible prophecy. Who are those brothers? It's a little difficult with the northern kingdom about to be utterly eradicated, completely erased from the face of the earth, 10 tribes that are just gone. I don't know, speaking about them, is possible, hard to say. Could it be the other nations? That word brother can kind of imply that these are other nations. Who would that include? Us. Unless you happen to be Jewish. I don't think any of you are. Most of our ancestors at this time were painting themselves blue and living in trees up in Germany and Scotland, someplace. So, anyway, interesting kind of pushing out here. It's going to get a little better. Someone read 4, 5, and 6, please.
He will stand and shepherd them in the strength of the Lord, in the majestic name of the Lord his God. They will live securely, for then his greatness will extend to the ends of the earth. He will be their peace. When Assyria invades our land, when it marches against our fortresses, we will raise against it 7 shepherds, 8 leaders of men. They will shepherd the land of Assyria with the sword, the land of Nimrod with a drawn blade. So he will rescue us from Assyria when it invades our land and when it marches against our territory.
Now here again, we have one of these hoppy, jumpy, aroundy kind of a little messages of prophecy here. I think it's very clear verse 4 is directly prophesying the ministry of the Messiah of our Lord Jesus. I don't think there's any question about that. Was this fulfilled? The question you got to ask yourself, was this fulfilled in the prophet's own time? Was this fulfilled in the history of Judah? And the answer, I think, is pretty obviously no. But then right after that first sentence of verse 5, it cuts over now into the immediate. I think this is a prophecy of the future. I think from verse 4 to that first sentence of verse 5 is a prophecy that extends beyond even us today. I believe this is actually speaking to Christ's second coming, to the establishment of the millennial kingdom. I feel very, very certain about that. They'll live securely. How secure you feel? You can't even walk out of Union High School without tearing your foot up on a rock or whatever it was. We're not even sure what it was. You know, how secure are you just in walking down the street or in anything else that you do? Yeah, this hadn't happened yet, folks, but it will. And talking about the greatness of Christ, even the Messiah, the Anointed One, will extend to the end of the earth. He will be their peace. Here again, it's kind of like truth. Peace is not a concept. Peace is not an absence of conflict or anything like that. Peace is a person. Start to think of it that way. Kind of changes it, doesn't it? Now, boom, we go with, he puts a period on it, and I don't know why. It's almost like verse 5 actually should begin with where it says when in Assyria. Now he's talking about the immediate situation again, with the invasion of Syria, Assyria rather. This is really interesting. This says he'll raise 7 shepherds, even 8 leaders of men. 7, even 8. We've seen some things like that before, little figures of speech. Very common in Hebrew. In this particular case, it indicates a great abundance. Meaning, and I've heard people say this, and let me apply this maybe a little bit to our situation right now. You look at the mess, yeah, I'll say that. You look at the mess our country's in. Doesn't matter what political party you belong to or what how you think or your approach about that thing. I don't think anybody's happy with where we are right now. The whole thing is just an absolute catastrophe. And you just look at it and you think too, looking back, for example, World War II, for example, the leaders that we had who helped, you know, the national leaders, the military leaders, where did these people come from? You know, we had, I mean, just go down the list. Dwight Eisenhower, Chester Nimitz. You know, Eisenhower from up here, well, was he born in Kansas, wasn't he? Yeah, born in Denton, Texas. Grew up in Abilene. Yeah. And that's right. Chester Nimitz, the greatest admiral that ever lived, been born in Texas Hill Country. Never seen anything bigger than a pond. You know, I don't know how they got him. George Patton, an incredible story of his lifetime and early life is absolutely fascinating. Gosh, on down the list, Mark Clark and Hap Arnold and I'm forgetting 50,000 of them. Douglas MacArthur, on and on and on. You know, of course, in Bernard Montgomery and all of these incredible people who were just the right people at the right time. And people wonder, you know, what would happen today if we got into a conflict like that? You know, I believe the right people, you know what though? I believe the right people would emerge. I believe God has a way of doing that. 7 shepherds, even 8 leaders of men. I think God can do that. Now, I don't know that he will. I'd almost be afraid to ask him to. I don't know what we've got's worth keeping in a lot of context. But God can do that. He's done it in the past. He certainly has done it for Israel. I think he's done it for us. But I think that's what's being implied here. God says, you know, when this conflict with Assyria does break out, don't worry. I'm going to supply the right people, the right leaders in the right places. 7, even 8, meaning you're going to have plenty of good, solid people to lead you, and you're going to be successful. Wow. Appreciate that. Verse 7, somebody, please.
Then the remnant of Jacob will be among the many peoples, like dew from the Lord, like showers on the grass, which do not wait for anyone or linger for mankind.
Here we are back to that remnant. What can God do with a remnant? He's pushed ahead again now, the remnant of who? Jacob. So I believe his reference to Jacob is a reference to the entire nation in the condition it was in here. Remember, Israel means prince with God. Jacob means what? Con artist. Okay. And I think God uses that word intentionally here to kind of jab him a little bit and remind him just exactly what the issue is here to start with. But that even so, that remnant experience, we're sitting here, golly, 2,700 years or so after this prophecy was made. And we're sitting here half a world away from where it happened, where it was given. We live here in a place they didn't even know about it this time. We have the span of 2,700 years to look back on what's happened and how God has been at work. So what's verse 7 telling us? How does the remnant of this con man Jacob, what's left of that few survivors of his ultimate offspring here, how are they like to do from the Lord, like showers on the grass? In other words, an incredible blessing to basically everyone in the entire world. How did that ever come true? Did God really use those people like that? Or maybe at least one person out of those people. He did. What's his name? Thank you. Yes. Yes. That even goes back and fulfills the promise God made to Abraham, that I'm going to use you, your offspring, to bless the entire world. Abraham hadn't seen anything more than just basically Western Iraq and part of Syria and part of what ultimately became Israel. He really hadn't. I mean, he was traveled better than most people in his time, but he couldn't conceive of how much more world that there was out there. And yet God told him the entire world. And did God mean the entire world? You better believe he did. And here's that, basically, I think that same promise here. Pardon me, that coffee had a bone in it. I don't know what happened. Verses 8 and 9, if someone would read those words, please.
Then the remnant of Jacob will be among the nations, among many peoples, like a lion above the animals of the forest, like a young lion among flocks of sheep, which tramples and tears as it passes through, and there is no one to rescue him. Your hand will be lifted up against your adversaries, and all your enemies will be destroyed.
Now, I think here we have a very hoppy-aroundy kind of a little message here, but I think it the remnant of Jacob. So we're back to where we kind of started. It's that remnant, and it's referring to Jacob, but I think it gets a lot more specific here. Jacob would encompass the entire nation, all the tribes, right? But now he starts to mention a lion among the animals of the forest. Okay, this is trivia, maybe really testing you real bad. But remember back in Exodus, when the people had just come out of, they got in the law, and Moses is getting them organized, because to run this many people on this trip, you can't just do that like a rabble. You've got to really organize things and get them going in certain orders, formations, how they're supposed to do things. And that's exactly how Moses did it. They had the tribes, and each tribe had a banner and a standard that they would do. Whose banner, whose flag of all of the tribes of Israel, whose flag had a lion on it?
Judah.
Judah. Yeah, Judah. Okay. Who's the southern kingdom? Judah. Benjamin, yeah, but Benjamin was little, didn't, it was still had been almost wiped out. So Judah and Benjamin, and of course Levi, now, why Levi? We never count Levi. Well, no, Levi's never counted because they didn't own land. Levi's still a tribe of Levi's still with them, but they're there, but you don't count them. It's kind of like Dick taking attendance. I don't know how he figures out who to count and who not, but anyway, as long as you make sure you do it on the optimistic side. Yeah. Preacher appreciates that. Anyway, so I think he's being specific now. I think we're talking about out of all of Israel, guess who's left ultimately is Judah, which is the southern kingdom primarily. Now he's talking about how basically unconquerable he's going to be. Did that happen in Micah's lifetime? Not really. I don't think so. Now, is the remnant of Jacob among the nations? Does that happen? You better believe it. You better believe it. How many Jewish people live here in Tulsa? We have a very nice Jewish population, and many other cities around New York City. I guess you realize there are more Jewish people living in New York City than live in the nation Israel. Don't ever forget that. I think that's an interesting note, but it's true. But of course we have the nation Israel. I mean, it'd be hard to find a country anywhere on earth now that doesn't have a pretty significant Jewish population. I think that's significant. And I think as we get into the times of the end, it becomes even more significant. But there is one particular significant individual from the tribe of Judah, descended directly from David, indirectly through the kingly line, only by adoption, not directly, but by adoption in the kingly line, but directly nonetheless from David himself, not through Solomon, but through his other son Nathan, by blood. His name's Jesus. We're coming up on his birthday here. And when Jesus, if you read back toward the end of the Bible, and you see where Jesus finally, where Satan gets his last rebellion, his last, attack, and, flinging everything he can. What do we call that? It's called Armageddon, right? And what's the result of that?
We win.
That's it. Yeah, you better believe we do. You better believe it. And who's actually leading the charge? Who's at the front of the angel armies? The Lord Jesus himself. Yeah. Start sounding kind of that might be lining up. Isn't it incredible? Micah is prophesying to the immediate situation that's happening to these people, and yet extending out, well, at least 2,700 years. It hadn't happened yet. Isn't that awesome? We serve a mighty God. We serve a mighty God, and it's incredible how he uses these prophets like Micah, like all these others, to not only to speak the truth. Micah's not sugarcoating anything. He's already told them, folks, you are going into captivity. This is not optional. God has made up his mind. You are going to be grounded. And I don't care what you say, you're still grounded. Okay? But guess what? You won't be grounded forever. Okay? You will be disciplined. You will pay the penalty for what you have done, but you'll be restored. Everything's going to be okay. I'll always love you. I love you even during that time. And I'm going to restore you, and I'm going to do things through you you can't even imagine. How could they? Yeah, I mean, it never did really fully dawn on them just how incredible Messiah was going to be. And I'm going to tell you this, I don't think I even completely appreciate how incredible Messiah is. Really don't. I really don't. I think I think I sell the Lord short. I don't think I really fully appreciate all that he did for me, all he continues to do for us. I think that's us and our limitations. But isn't it incredible to see this prophet at work and the things that he has to say? Just amazing.
You've got a pretty good record of his prophecies coming true.
Yes, he
It's
does.
pretty high value, man.
Yes. Can't get much higher. I don't know how many more nines you need out there. But you know what? That we can, looking back, knowing that he's done this in the past, how does that make you feel about the future?
Secure.
I sleep better at night. I sure do. Yeah. And not because I'm clever, not because I'm very smart or very strong or anything like that, but I know who is. And I know he's got me covered. Can't ask for more, huh? Anyway, thank y'all so much for being here on this frigid November morning. And for those of you at home, Lisa, Glenee, and Alicia, thank you for joining us this morning. I hope you're staying warm. Except Lisa, I hope your left foot is very cold because of the big ice bag you have on it. And anyway, look forward. Hopefully we can be a little more together next week. Anyone who has any deviled eggs left over, I want you to know that deviled eggs are absolutely my favorite food on the entire earth. So if you have any leftovers that need a good home,
We can afford eggs.
and it's true, I can't even feed the chickens for crying out loud, so I know it. Well, I just thought I'd mention that, another story attached to that as well. But anyway, love you guys. Thank you so much for being here, and you guys at home as well. Let's have a word of prayer and we'll be dismissed. Father, I just thank you so much for just how incredible your word is. Lord, as we read these prophets and we look at each individual one and how you've used them and how each one of them is so different, and yet their message is expressed differently, but it's so consistent, Father, and giving us a warning to heed your word, to obey you, and to walk in your ways, to know you better. And we see the history, Father, of those who obey and those who don't, and how even all of them, go through some what would look like desperate experiences, and yet your prophecy makes so clear that you're in control, that your will is being done, is being put forward, and that we're secure in you, and that you will always provide for your people and the situation to make your name known. Remind us, Father, I pray, that it's not about us, it's about you. And that's really, really all that's important. And so make us obedient, Father, to doing your will, to knowing you and being useful and used by you to tell others about you. I just pray you'll just fill our worship time this morning with your presence. I pray that we will praise you, honor, love you, strengthen us, help us to know you better. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Keep your feet warm. Absolutely. Yeah, we've got free.